Yeah, I think this kind of leads me to the question you have here under the common Filipino experience. You ask, have you ever had an identity crisis, struggle between being American or Filipino? Yeah, definitely that one, yes.
Oh, wow. I didn't know
So,
that. Can you explain that?
yeah, so, I grew up in the Philippines um, and moved to the US when I was 15 or 16. And so for my first year of culture shock, all I wanted to do was go home. Like, I didn't want to make friends after a while, right? I didn't, after the first 3 or 4 months of like, wow, this is America. Everything's nice. But then I couldn't go out, couldn't ride the jeepney. I didn't have as much freedom as I had in the Philippines. And I couldn't relate to other people. And so at that time, like, I was rejecting everything about America. I just wanted to go back because that's where I belonged. I didn't belong in the US. I go to church and nobody spoke my language. I have to be the one to adjust to English. And maybe this is just a personal thing, right? It probably doesn't speak to everybody. But, there was that time where I'm rejecting American culture. Like, I didn't want to be in it. But over the years, of course, through the years, as I get used to it here and I go to school here, I make friends here, then slowly I'm beginning to enjoy living in the US more, beginning to have more friends, part of me is beginning to really belong in this place where I'm at. And then you start thinking about, okay, you start comparing both cultures and figuring out, where you're at on that spectrum, which ones you accept, which ones you reject. So I'm kind of comfortable now where I'm at. I think I could relate to both cultures, but definitely there was a struggle between being American or Filipino, especially in the beginning. Because it feels like you're turning your back on something you've known for so long to embrace like a new culture, because you have to embrace that new culture in order to really enjoy living here. Because if you don't, then you're not going to enjoy living where you're at. I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to forget who you are, but you just have to accept new realities and new cultures and new ways of thinking about stuff and new ways of customs and behaviors. Like even just the simple concept of time. Like, I just have to accept that I have to be early or I have to be there on time. To show respect.
Yeah. Interesting. That's interesting. I wanted to clarify two parts that you said. Is there a time when you like how did you come to embrace American culture then? Since you mentioned embrace, the importance of embrace.
I think it's when I started to have deeper relationships with people who are not exactly very Filipino. And then also when I started working here and going to school here and realizing and seeing, what it's like to be here. Yeah.
Was there a switch in your mind that said, I need to embrace American culture, or was it just gradual?
I think it's both. So one of the switches was when I went back to the Philippines and I realized that, you kind of have to see the difference, right? When I went back and I'm like, okay, I don't have as much friends here anymore. They've all moved on. I kind of like the system in the US. I don't like the traffic as much. but like I kind of like how some things are run, right? You know, I still compare it, but I still kind of like how warm relationships are within the Filipino community. So, you know, there's things that you accept and you reject.
Okay. So that was a gradual thing.
Yeah, I think it's a gradual thing. It's both gradual and a switch. It's not like one big switch. It's like multiple little small switches.
Okay. And then also another thing I wanted to ask was, like, you identify as Filipino American now, but I'm sure that when I asked the Aaron in 2004, he would identify as Filipino.
That's right. Yeah, so, because like I think at that time, like again, I was really into like Filipino music. I had Filipino friends, and you have to understand, when I was in the Philippines, like the friendships are really deep, and you know, it's like I guess like my pride being a Filipino is really high. I'm still very proud to be a Filipino. But yeah, I think it's just that when you're in culture shock, you can't really see the value of one culture over another. You know, especially if you're on that stage of like, you know, a culture shock has different stages. The first one, I think, is where you are in awe, and then there's that stage of like you miss everything, and then there's that stage of like, I hate everything about this culture. You know,
yeah.
Especially if you're in that stage.
So I guess your identification as being Filipino American, it comes hand in hand with your embrace of Filipino American culture.
Yeah.